Hello and welcome back to Podcasting as Praxis. I'm David, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Jamie, my pronouns are he and him.
I'm Rob, mine are he and him.
And I'm Alistair, my pronouns are also he and him.
And joining us tonight is the wonderful Matt Zarb-Cousin.
Good evening. My pronouns are also he and him, and I'm also the co-founder of Gamban, blocking software, and director of Cleanup Gambling, as well as being the former spokesperson for Jeremy Corbyn, which I need to stop dining out on that because that was about 6 years ago.
Fair enough. Oh dear. That's a fucking hell of a resume for the start of this. Usually it's we like them on Twitter, and that's the only qualification somebody has. So cool.
Well, don't worry, Matt also fits the bill on that front. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not to take away from that section of it as well.
Yeah, and most importantly, we like him.
Exactly.
Very kind.
Rob, what misery and fucking hell do you have for me on this overly hot day?
Well, I mean, obviously, FYI, this is the start of hot recording season. So this is episode 1 of Heat Madness, just for David this time.
Starting entirely localised around David.
It's so fucked up. Why is it here? The rest of Scotland is never like this. It's fucked up.
Because God's up there fucking with James and you're just collateral damage.
There's ants in the sun.
Yeah. Oh, they'll be mad when they hear this back.
Someone kicked a football at the moon.
Oh dear.
Now, obviously, we brought Matt on because the new white paper on gambling in the UK is out, so that's going to be our main topic for later. But first, David, I have good news for you, and really for everybody on this podcast. We can all go home. We've been replaced.
Bye.
It's
Yeah, Comrade TTS, over to you.
Is this going to be about that absolutely fucking, dumb fucker with his, what if Bill Gates and,
Socrates, yes.
Well, all right, okay.
Oh, God.
I was going to say Plato. But what if those two cunts had a conversation in a really bad Civ 3 cutscene?
Here you go.
Ah, my dear friend Bill, I see you have brought a device with you today. What purpose does it serve?
Greetings, Socrates. This is a laptop, a marvel of modern technology. It harbors an artificial intelligence that can revolutionize heuristic education.
Interesting.
Imagine a world where students learn at their own pace, guided by a tireless tutor that never errs.
Is this the MacBook you often refer to?
No. This is a Surface. You just need to remember that. Surface.
Fascinating. But tell me, what is the
AI
essence
do
of
the canned
this
laughter as
artificial
well?
intelligence you
Yes.
speak of?
It is a machine that can learn and reason, built
Wow.
upon vast amounts of data and complex algorithms. It imitates human thought processes to provide tailored learning experiences.
I sense a shadow over this marvel, a hidden danger lurking within.
Uh-huh.
Well,
I have approximate knowledge of many things.
Can you get a clip of that fucking bit where he just went interesting? I feel like that would come in handy. If I can just have a button with that on for me tonight, so I don't have to take part.
oh, and who says this technology isn't for everyone?
I've got a headache and that hurt less.
Oh man, it's going to be incredible. Just every 5 minutes, that podcast is going to interrupt itself with the Wikipedia begging message saying "Can you give £5?"
Podcasting is praxis, but everyone's the fucking Jimmy Wales or whatever the fuck it is.
But yeah, just more good news from the front of AI, which everybody still calls AI, and I know that this podcast does not believe that it is AI, but I look very much to being replaced, and I think certainly everybody who's on our Patreon, www.patreon.com/praxiscast, will very much appreciate all of us. Do you reckon we could just feed in our 204 odd episodes and just retire at this point?
No.
Yeah, but could we try?
I mean, you can try
Interesting.
whatever you want, mate.
Yeah, we feed in every single bunch of show notes that we've ever made, and it just comes back with a bunch of the cat picture.
Comes back with an episode of Seinfeld that some prick on Twitter wrote for clout.
No, but remember we did this thing where we fed a bunch of fucking Starmer speeches into one of those fucking things, and it just kept coming back with like actual policies and sounding like he gave a fuck. So quite clearly we'll be outed immediately as just like frauds.
Yeah.
I thought that was already out.
Well, frauds of the shit characters that we are. But no, like that was dead like actually like good and had some decent policies and seemed to care and didn't have any qualms about anything.
The Keir Starmer that centrists believe exists.
Yeah. So this podcast would just be us, but sounding like upbeat and hopeful for the future, and would be fucked up.
Can't be having that.
No, exactly.
We've got a brand to maintain.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you see a bright future for what was it? What is again Brit GPT? Maybe Matt. Is that going to be the thing that will automatically solve all our problems in the future?
Brit GPT. Apparently, that's we need to do basically. This is the solution, right? This is how we're going to compete in the new world. We're going to have our own version of Brit GPT. I think anything with Brit as a suffix is always doomed to fail in the tech space.
Yep.
BritBox.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of any other.
Britcoin, yeah.
Remember that? Remember when
Britcoin?
they learned that NFTs and Bitcoin were a thing that exists, and they were like, well, boy, gotta get on this bandwagon because everyone seems to be talking about it.
Aren't BritBox doing really well selling spitting image to the Americans? I assume that's a guaranteed money spinner.
Anyway, in other British good news, so remember, like we talked about a bit last week. Remember how like the cost of living was exploding, and like food prices are up by like about 20%.
I love your use of the word "remember" there, as if I'm in a position to forget.
Well, I think Jamie, with you, quite frankly, anything is possible. So food prices
I'm going to come over to Switzerland and steal your fucking house, mate.
I literally send you food packages. I don't think I'm in a position to be robbed. But yeah, so like food prices are up. I think it's about 19.2% as of today. But don't worry about it.
Seems fine.
I have good news. The Tory government has learned of these facts and is distraught on your behalf. So they are here to help.
Oh, good.
I love it when a Tory government intervenes in my life because it always ends well.
So this was first reported by The Telegraph as Rishi Sunak will ask stores to cap basic food prices.
Ask.
Yes.
Ask. Oh yeah, because it's voluntary, isn't it?
It is voluntary. That's the good part about it.
Excuse me, Mr. Capitalist. Please, would you like to reduce your profits slightly?
Isn't voluntary price caps? Isn't that just market forces? I mean, I don't know.
Pretty much, yes.
It's basically how you can, how much you can get away with charging is a voluntary sort of cap. The thing that was best about this story, I thought, was the replies to the tweet that the Telegraph put out, which were basically a load of libertarian-aligned undergrads just tearing their hair out, saying we're heading for communism. So I thought that was quite enjoyable.
Oh yeah, I remember that we were already like that we were on the road to communism because somebody's asked to do a voluntary thing which they simply will not do. It's
it's the thought that counts, though, Rob.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's the thin end of the wedge. Do you know what I mean? The libertarians are angry about this because, like, you have price controls on bread. What's next? Price controls on the age of consent. It's madness. You know what I mean? They've got to stay.
They're all
vigilant.
just really desperate to own us by posting that picture of like the Cuban supermarket where all the products look the same.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Look at these well-priced products. Oh no.
This is a photo of a London supermarket where there's like nothing there but like cheese that's too expensive to steal.
Yeah.
that was. I think it was Seb Payne. No, it was Tom Hardwood or Darren Grimes, one of those two idiots, during the COVID crisis.
Tom
like
Hardwood.
They were post. Well, that's merely a spurious allegation. We can't confirm or deny that.
We've gene spliced Tom Hardy and Tom Hardwood.
No, he was posting some picture. It was in the minute, like at the start of COVID, when everybody was like panic buying food and toilet paper, and he took a picture of an actual UK supermarket inside it with like all the shelves bare, and then said, "If we'd elected Jeremy Corbyn, this is what we would have had." And like, you're standing in the actual empty supermarket under capitalism, and yet somehow this is all now Jeremy Corbyn's fault or something. It was truly incredible stuff.
I mean, this is a breed of people that when they stub their toe, they cry out his name. So, like, it's not really much of a surprise, is it?
Yeah, if anything, the only problem with that tweet was it.
So, of course, I think this was like the association, like the lobby organization of like the major supermarkets, immediately said, look, we might consider doing something along these lines, but won't somebody please think of the poor corner shops who can't compete with us on price level? So if you implement this, like the noble corner shop is going to die.
Okay, but what about the actual people that are going to die?
They're not as important as small business owners.
Yeah. Have you considered that a corner shop owner also needs to consume food to survive, Alistair?
Wow, there's a lot to think about there.
So basically, the reason they're thinking about doing this, apart from, people need to eat and are going hungry, is that this is not like entirely dissimilar to some measures that the French actually did, as well as the Greeks and the Spanish. Because basically over there, they've said that like a wide range of like basically supermarket, own brand staples would be, this is in France, they are to be mandatorily priced at the lowest possible level, which basically means you can, the supermarket can charge for like production and shipping costs, but they can't charge a profit on it. And the government is also not reimbursing French supermarkets. So they are expected to lead like hundreds of millions of losses. So it's like you can just do these things if you want. Like even under Emmanuel Macron, like not, the greatest example of, communism in the world. You can just do this stuff if you put your mind to it. It's not actually impossible.
Are the French still rioting?
I don't think they ever stopped, Jamie, to be fair.
Yeah,
And
full credit.
to them on that front.
I mean, I haven't heard it about it on the news for a while because that was over raising the pension age.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Haven't seen anything.
They've obviously been converted to the correct ideological thought of Marxism, Jupiterianism, so like it's probably fine.
No, David. Like what Marx failed to consider was that in order to usher in the revolution, you need to elect the most annoying guy possible, and then everything just falls into place as everyone is sick of his shit.
I don't like that because you've implied that I might be counter-revolutionary.
David is pulling into Finland station against his will and saying it's hot here. So basically the supermarkets are already like briefing that they don't have the profit margins necessary to like make some staples slightly cheaper.
Get the fuck out of here.
They were the only things open in COVID. I mean, they're the only. Their profits were not affected whatsoever from the pandemic. I mean, everyone's got to pay a price, right?
Haven't various supermarkets' profits like doubled between this year and like 2 years ago?
They have. I think it's time we started
investing in Tesco shares.
There's really no other way to go about it, I'm afraid.
That headache's really hitting you, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm off my game.
I mean, look, you say this, but I had a quick look at, some of the profit margins of the major supermarkets just to check how impoverished they really were. And like Tesco is right; they only made $1.5 billion this year, down from $2.5 billion last year. This is according to their own accounts.
Bands.
Well, I mean, just to follow up on your solution thesis of doing something about the shareholders, they also did a £1 billion stock buyback to juice the price, which is not at all a scam thing. It's something that you can do quite legally in most countries. So they did make $2.5 billion.
I wonder if stock buybacks come under the same category that you put your profits in. Weird. The spreadsheet seems to say yes, but what do I know?
Odd.
They're just a small beans retailer. Like, just leave them.
Other small bean retailers include Asda, which made £886 million, and Sainsbury's, which made £2/3 of a billion, so £667 million. So they can't. You can't ask these people to like take 10p off the Tesco basic loaf of bread or anything like that. Tesco value. Sorry.
No, you should fucking demand.
I mean, to be fair, it's not just like that these people are massively profiteering. There are real costs running through the system, but that's mainly energy costs and supply chains. So farming, the price of food is incredibly related to the price of energy, due to the farming systems we have. So as long as the energy prices are high or were high in the past, you're going to have very high food prices. So
I feel like Rob's about to sneak in a little chat about gas prices again.
Well, I've got a solution for high energy prices that if anyone wants to hear it. Very similar to the previous solution I voiced.
If only there was some sort of national organisation that would have the powers to do something about all of this.
Oh well, David, I'm glad you asked.
I want the government formed Guillotine Club.
Well, I'm glad you asked, David. Not specifically in relation to the food crisis, because that would be too practical, but Labour has a plan for things to get the growth back going, and I assume that somehow that's going to help you with your grocery bill.
Missions these days.
This is one of their 5 missions. So last week was this is the old message grid. So last week we had the AI infestation of the NHS. I presume that Socrates will have a word or two to say about that too. And this week it was time for Rachel Reeves.
They train the AI on that Bill Gates and Socrates thing, and it comes back telling everyone the humours are imbalanced.
Do you reckon Starmer's gone to ChatGPT to just find synonyms for the word pledge?
He's going to give the electorate 5 quests.
So this is the second sub-quest about the economy, mainly introduced by Rachel Reeves going on the world's most expensive plane ride and then trying to hide her ticket and reposting and then failing again, which was incredibly good.
She wouldn't have needed a flying ticket if the government would just implement flying mounts.
Yeah, but then they'd have to redesign the entire country to be based around that, don't Jamie? And then you just can't be spending that much.
They would have to
money
finish
on doing
Slough.
something like that.
Actually, well, this is their way of reinventing the country, and the basis of this redesign is going to be securonomics. That's the buzzword.
Fuck off.
Didn't we hear something similar to this in a recent episode?
Yeah, we just did securitarian politics last week, which said fucking nothing.
Yeah, well, fortunately for you, I read both the Labour briefing documents and the Labour Together briefing paper written by Rachel Reeves, so, and I read her
wonderful
speech.
medical paper written on whatever brain disease Rob has at some point.
Rob will read it too.
Yeah, that's true. So the basic concept of securonomics is like a version of Joe Biden's economic policy of the last few years, which, that's made him unendingly popular at home. So, nothing going wrong there. It basically involves not like reshoring.
Does it
so
involve,
like bringing.
Rob, let me just. Does it involve promising a bunch of stuff that you're going to do when you're in power and then just not doing it?
I can't tell. So one element is something called friendshoring, where basically it's like, look, we're not going to necessarily bring the factories back to the UK, but we may put them in a country that's more friendly to us. That's like the "we are scared of China" paranoia.
Friendshoring.
Yes.
We're not going to move the manufacturing back here, but we'll move it somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I've been really, really busy. I haven't read the paper. Did they actually call it friendshoring?
Yeah, that's the new hotness. So what we would do is we would take our widget factories out of China and we would place them in a country that's
more amenable to American imperialism. Is that the gist?
No,
yes,
I think
pretty
that's
much.
Friend showing.
It's basically part of this is just paranoia about China. That's very much what we're doing here. And the other part is basically like some money for doing good things for the climate, basically to make sure David is cold enough to keep recording. All right, so this is from Rachel Reeves's speech to some New York think tank.
I love it when a platitude is just going to be embedded within a platitude. It's going to be really stuff. I can feel it already.
From the ashes of the old hyper-globalization, securonomics emerges.
What?
Building the industries that guarantees Britain's economic security, forging resilience at home while creating new partnerships abroad, and bringing together an
home.
Yes, don't worry, we have.
We've put all the jobs. We've put all the jobs in another country, so just toughen the fuck up.
Jamie, you need to get enough resilience so you can get above the crit cap. So...
Yeah.
Matt, here. This is just a succinct explanation of what securonomics is for you. Securonomics means ensuring that a mum and dad in Worthing or Wyoming who are doing everything right no longer feel like they are doing something wrong. But
that
more
seems
than
like
that,
a very targeted policy, if you ask me, targeting a mum and dad, and that's it.
But in a town, no less, Alistair. This is there's lots of towns in this thing. You live in a town.
Fascinating. It's fascinating to see Labour coming out with policy proposals that are specifically tailored to individuals.
American individuals, nonetheless.
Specifically tailored to individuals, but written by AI Socrates, I think.
It's more than that. They can start to take advantage of the enormous opportunities in our economies. This is the true promise of securonomics.
Wow. Frankly, I'm just surprised that there was a definite article in any of that.
I've read the briefing papers. I won't bore you with like all of it because that will make this a whole episode. But in her words, this would make a more active state happen. Like sort of the reverse of Thatcherism. If Thatcherism was about the state shouldn't be involved in the successes of the free market, this is not the reverse of that. But this is like saying like the
there
Labour
should be
Party
a cop overseeing every part of it.
Yeah, I mean, this is it does tally with. I mean, there is some degree of coherence running through it. I mean, Starmer's talked about partnership between the state and business, and it just sounds very much like corporatism, and really, it's corruption. Really, it's more and more money probably going to go to management consultants and companies like Carillion, not them necessarily, but companies like them. And I think that's kind of what's going to end up happening. Is going to be more private companies into the public sector picking up those contracts, and that's dressed up as this kind of public-private partnership, which hasn't gone well in the past.
Under Labour, you too could live in a company town.
As long as more money goes to Stella Creasy's family, we're all good.
I mean, it is, Matt, to your point, this is from one of the, I think this is from the Labour Together paper that I read. It is also an invitation to a greater partnership between those who share values and interests and between those who want to address the challenges and seize the opportunities of tomorrow, together. So that is you're exactly on the money. What they're doing is like they're saying to Carillion, and it's like there's a reason she's doing this on Wall Street as well, right? She's saying to BlackRock, to the big investment fund, she's saying, look, don't worry about it. Labour is once again the absolutely rock solid, safe place for capital to come and play. And also, like, her version of the state will be more active is the state will make more money available to the private sector as like a catalyst. Like, the state's not going to do anything. There will just be more funds for you to like reach in and fill your boots with, as long as you make like vague noises that you'll make something nice and preferably green.
It's very funny that they need to do this, like, because even during the fucking Corbyn era, you had McDonnell giving big speeches to like the CBI and that, and it was very much, don't panic, we're not here to spook you. Like, and it worked for the most part. They were quite like, yeah, we could get through whatever that would be. That probably wouldn't be terrible. It was only the batshit fucking nuts crowds that were like vehemently fucking opposed to the idea of a Corbyn economic policy or a McDonnell economic policy. Whereas with this, they for some reason feel that they need to go crawling away to BlackRock and be like, we promise we'll be good, because like they've got the same kind of brain worms.
Well, I think that they can also then say that that's why we won, and that gives them the veneer of legitimacy for pursuing this agenda. I think that's what it is. It's like it's creating that context. So if they do win the election because it's fallen into their lap because the Tories have imploded, they can say, well, actually, it was because we went crawl into BlackRock.
Yeah, I mean, so
the future. The future's so good.
Basically, entire economic policy around post hoc ergo propter hoc is great to see.
Basically, so like what they're saying is the UK would just fundamentally the UK, they wouldn't do like true state intervention or anything. They would just say, look, like we are going to do Britain, but like we would just simply manage it better. And the first thing they like I said, a lot of this is about ensuring capital. So they start off both these briefing papers by saying, we will not touch the central bank independence. The Treasury hive mind is going to stay in place, and by extension, between those two things, the London City and the trading that goes on there will not be touched. So what I've read is like inside this mission, there are 5 subquests. I won't go into all of them, but the first thing, of course, is they say, we've talked about this on previous episodes, is the providing certainty and stability, which they will do by introducing clear fiscal rules with a new enhanced role for the Office of Budget Responsibility, which was going to be,
Is it the OBR that produces those graphs that look great?
Yes, every year, or like clockwork.
The graphs that are always right.
The graphs that show like the UK economy like going up and like a direct 45-degree increase, and then it just like the flat line that follows a reality. But they will also set up the Office for Value for Money, which I really thought they dropped that, like a long while ago. It's a lot about like, providing catalytic public investment through the Green Prosperity Plan to crowd in private sector investment to the industries of the future. And that, as you say, Matt, that's just bribes to, that's just bribes to private industry so they can get a lot of money. And basically what they want is like British vaults, but in every town.
It's a very interesting play for like, it's a play to get capital on side, obviously, but it's an interesting one because obviously the Tories, their natural kind of appeal to capital would be to reduce taxes, but they can't do that. And they can't do the sort of things perhaps Labour's talking about in such blatant terms anyway, because I mean the ideological opposition to that. So I think Labour's just basically seized that opportunity and said we're going to make all of these funds available. We're going to open everything up. They're talking in no uncertain terms about privatising the NHS. Really, I think opening that more up to the private sector, and that's going to appeal to capital way more. I think actually they've outflanked the Tories from the right to some degree. I think if you don't look at it through a normal kind of left-right paradigm of low taxes, tax and spend, then I think that actually they're appealing to corporate interests much more than the Conservatives.
Yeah, and I think it also shows like the people currently in charge of the Labour Party, it shows them up internally as well, because like if you are a Labour Party that wants to like shred its left and isn't really too keen on being associated with unions in general anymore, like this is what you would do. Like you create a state that does more handouts in more places, and then look in the private sector, not just like by just giving them like some money, like the whole PPE thing under the Tories during COVID, but saying, look, we want you to engage we're going to engage in a 10 or a 20 year project to build wind farms off the coast of somewhere or other, and we're going to do that with Carillion and EDF and like a couple of other big corporates. Then, like, you also give them a motivation to say, look, you see the Tories over there, they're against wind farms because they have gone ideologically insane. Come the next election cycle, you should also stay with us because this project isn't finished, and like you should therefore also keep donating to us because you want this sort of these handouts of state money to keep going on the long term. If the Tories come back in, they might actually opposed as I think they are and will remain to like any kind of green industrial policy, you can get serious chunks of the UK business sector involved in this and like sort of lock them in as donors at the same time.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. It's not just a play as well for, in terms of like Labour need to plug a massive funding gap too. So they need to be doing all of this stuff now. They need to be basically going cap in hand to donors. Otherwise they're not going to be able to fight a general election. They've lost so much money because of the...
I would simply stop losing court cases.
Yeah, they've got the court cases. They've got the decline in membership. The unions aren't exactly pleased with how everything's going, but
the non-scab unions at least.
Indeed, yeah. So, I mean, the ones with money. So they need to plug that gap. And obviously the Labour right, their MPs really want to be able to have somewhere to retire after Parliament too. So, creating a lot of these non-jobs through what so-called public sector private partnerships, I think that will suit them down to the ground. Wind farm advisor for EDF or something, I don't know.
Yeah. I genuinely think that like they won't do the same thing, because I do think they're like, in terms of just the pure mechanics, they'll have learned some of their lessons. But like you are looking at a resurgence of PFIs, basically. They'll give it like a new hat and put like a funny mustache on it, but that's essentially what you're looking for. And just to make sure that
mustache costs £250 to replace.
Absolutely, and just to make sure that there's truly something for everybody in these briefing documents. This is the last bit I'll read out. This is under the giving working people the skills and opportunities to get on, which is one of those awful phrases they've been stuck with for the last while.
It sounds like almost derived from Theresa May's "get on with the job," which was the phrase of the day.
Oh Christ! Yeah, it was. This is under working people the skills and opportunities to get on. We will create stronger links between our evidence-led, points-based immigration system and our skills bodies. So, and our skills bodies to make sure we have the skilled workforce we need. So, there's going to be something in it for the people who need to, say, have a exploited workforce to pick asparagus or strawberries or something like those. That's going to stay. I think they might reverse some trends about like getting people in like needed professions like nursing and stuff in. Like I do think they'll turn that around, but that will just be points based and much more like you can come here and work, but we will boot you out the moment you don't have a job anymore. Like,
I mean, a lot of people are saying that there's no real distinguishing factor between the Tories and Labour, but it feels to me like there is a pretty good distinguishing factor in that the Tories, they want to shrink the state. They want government to be small. But Labour, they want government to be big, but only specifically in the worst shit you can possibly think of.
So like
expand the Home Office, more contracts to Carillion. Yeah, all of the worst possible.
Border cops, all hoved off to the private sector.
2026, a cop in every home. Yep.
So one of the reasons, apart from the joy of his company, that we asked Matt on tonight is the government has just released its new white paper on the future of regulation of gambling in the UK. And so far as I've understood it, Matt, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm going to put a lot of conditionals in, it seems to address at least some of the serious issues that have occurred since the last regulation in 2005, and seems to be doing, or if it were implemented in the way that it says it will be, would make some things somewhat better. Is that about right, or am I being too negative? Or
extremely good summary. I think there's obviously a lot of caveats in there, but I think that's probably right. I think, look, it's taken the call for evidence for this review came out in 2020 December. And it's taken a long time. We've had a number of different gambling ministers since it started, and there's been a lot of twists and turns. And I mean, I talk about vested interests. There were people that were in number 10 in the latter days of Boris Johnson's tenure who were literally linked to public affairs companies, just come from public affairs companies that were doing work for the gambling industry, that were, crossing things out at that late stage. And then it didn't end up getting released because Boris Johnson didn't come back from holiday. So we went again, and there was another changing of the guard, and then Sunak came, and then Truss came in, obviously, and the whole thing looked like it was going to be shelved, and then Sunak, just thankfully she didn't last very long, and Rishi Sunak's team, a lot of the sort of, I'd say, in the context or within the parameters of the Tory party, more sensible people on this stuff returned, which was helpful, people you could actually work with, and a lot of the stuff came back into the white paper that was previously crossed out, and that's why we got things like a statutory levy, which is 1% of the profits going to independent research, education and treatment. That's going to raise 150 million a year. We got just for gambling related projects, and we got the stake limits for online slots, which at the moment they're unlimited, and that's where the majority of the profits comes from. We got affordability checks, so people who lose £1,000 in a day, or £500 in a day if you're under 25, or £2,000 over 3 months, or £1,000 if you're under 25 over 3 months, will be subject to an affordability check. So gambling companies will have to ask for their income data, proof of income, to ensure that they're not gambling beyond their means or getting themselves into debt. More resources for the regulator, better oversight of data, single customer view, which will ensure that it's possible to track people's losses over across different operators across the regulated sector. Okay. There's just lots of good stuff in there. My worry is that it will take quite a long time to actually implement. So they're talking about a year to do the stake limits on online slots, with the consultations that will follow, which could be, I mean, they've put a range of between £2 a spin and £15, but I'm hoping that it'll be closer to £2. And we'll obviously push for that. And then the levy is probably going to take about a year. And then the other stuff like the affordability checks, and they're talking about a consumer ombudsman as well, which I didn't mention. That's going to be a regulator-focused consultations, and which will probably take between 6 months and a year. So I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out, to be honest. I mean, it could have been worse. Lots of things are out of your control with this stuff. It's all about timing, and thankfully, in the context of this review, where we've tried to do so much and try and get so much over the line, most of it's happened. The one thing that hasn't happened is the marketing restrictions that we wanted. But I think that it just puts more pressure on government, that if you're going to promote a sector, then you better make sure it's safe. So I think that there's a bit of leverage there with the fact that they haven't actually taken action on marketing.
It does sort of feel like the problems in the gambling sector, like the people who've been so horrendously affected by it, like the problem has gotten to a point where it's just, you can't ignore it anymore, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think everyone knows someone, or knows someone who knows someone, and it's become like a recognised issue. I think there's been definitely a shift in understanding around gambling and how it can impact someone, and particularly around mental health. And it's, despite it not being a substance, it's the same. If a drug can release dopamine in your brain, or your brain releases the dopamine, it's a catalyst. Gambling is also a catalyst, and people understand that now. I think they understand the physiology of it more. The accessibility of some of the gambling products that we have in this country, that we've had for very, very many years, has been almost a test bed, and the rest of the world is looking on at what we've done in response to that. Particularly the US, which recently had a Supreme Court decision that overturned the ban on online gambling, and states are beginning to legalize it now, and they're looking to us, and they're seeing the harms from there, and they're saying we don't want to make the same mistakes that Britain has made, and the same mistakes, without adequate regulation of something that's particularly addictive. And you took a look at some of that online slots. It's about 45% of people that access online slots are either addicted or at risk, so they're experiencing some form of gambling harm, which is huge proportion of people who actually access that product, and the profits are coming from the people that are addicted or at risk. So about 86% of the profits online are coming from that 5% who are experiencing gambling problems, and they're constantly, obviously there's more people constantly falling into that 5% over time, and people in that 5% are going broke because they're addicted. So it's a very, very destructive business model. And you mentioned earlier about Tesco, and they made £1.5 billion profit, and that's Tesco. And I think I just did a bit of quick maths. If you add Asda and Sainsbury's, that's about 3 billion. The gambling, and this is food, everyone eats. And the gambling industry last year made close to 7 billion online gambling alone.
Jesus
7 billion
Christ.
Wow.
So that just gives you an idea of the scale of it. It's massive.
I mean, Matt, you were saying that like other countries are looking at the UK and like learning about basically like what not to do. But I was back home in the Netherlands a couple of weeks ago. I genuinely didn't know, so I had to like ask while I was there. But apparently, like the Dutch government has like legalized or like freed up a lot of online gambling. So like this is the first time I've been home since I think Christmas, and like every ad on every bus shelter, at least like every second ad, and in like shop windows everywhere, it was like bet, online this, online that, and it was all, you know, the Dutch version of the Premier League footballers fronting it. And I was just like, I was genuinely shocked that they'd done that, because like doing the research for this episode, I was just like, why would you do this again? Because like, I mean, I want to get into the whole like connection certainly with football a little bit as well, but like, I wanted to ask you as well, is like the profits that have been made and the problems that this has caused in society, like how has it actually come to this point? Because I think I want to say it's the 2005 Gambling Act that sort of set this whole train in motion.
Yeah, I mean, 2005 was a mistake for a number of reasons, and I think that it was before we knew that gambling was a proper addiction, like drugs and alcohol, like before the research was there, and it liberalised gambling as if it was like a harmless leisure activity, but it didn't even make provisions to regulate online gambling, and it was you know, before the smartphone was conceived of, and you know, most people, gambling on the internet was really not a thing then either, so it didn't really have the provisions in place to cater for that. So it wasn't until 2014 that the Gambling Commission licensed online gambling. Now the problem with that was everyone because they did it for the reason they did it was to generate revenue. They were losing out on a lot of revenue from the operators that were based offshore. So they said, if you want to access the British market and advertise here, you have to have a license. And if you have a license, then you have to pay a point of consumption tax on your UK profits or your GB profits. And then they ended up just licensing everyone. So there was very little due diligence in 2014. That's why we've got about 2,000 licensees in Britain, all of which are online gambling, online casino, sports betting, and it's been a bit of a free-for-all. And really what other countries have done since, like including the Netherlands, is they've looked at that and they've said, well, actually, we're going to have a higher bar of compliance. It's going to be more difficult to get a license. But because they've it's taken a while for them to get to that point, there has been a lot of pressure on the governments, not just of the Netherlands, but of other countries, to accelerate the liberalisation because of the prevalence of black market gambling and online gambling, because it's so easy to access this type of thing online. So it's important that, our view is it's better that it's legal and regulated. And if it's regulated and there's consumer protections in place, then basically the cat's out the bag now. There's no putting it back. There's no too many people are gambling. Too many people are aware that that's an option, and it's too easy and too accessible on the internet. So it's just about restricting and reducing the harm and the accessibility. And I think other countries have. I think the Netherlands is probably the best in Europe in terms of the requirements that they have, and it's been very, very difficult to get a license. But what's been interesting is a lot of the very unscrupulous operators are licensed in Curacao, and many of those operators are accessing the Netherlands market illegally, and the Netherlands government is basically saying, what the hell are you doing? So that's quite an interesting dynamic where you've got
government doing something about wow. What's that like, Rob?
I mean, I don't know. I don't live there. I live in a different functional country. But
fucking don't rub it in. But to your point, Matt, like the way you're talking about all of this sounds exactly like the approach that could or should be taken if drugs were actually decriminalized and legalized fully, which is not entirely surprising, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it, exactly. I think it's better that there's availability. And I get called, it's funny because I get called all sorts by the gambling industry. I mentioned earlier about non-jobs for ex-Labour MPs. There's nothing more exemplary than the Betting and Gaming Council when it comes to that. But, they're very keen to call anyone who calls for reform a prohibitionist. But I think that would be a disaster if you banned gambling. Of course, you would create a black market and you would create illegal gambling, but that's just simply not going to happen in Britain, where there's never been the opportunity for an illegal market to get a foothold. We've always allowed gambling. We've always allowed online gambling. It's never been banned. We regulated bookmakers. Well, we permitted bookmakers in the 1960s, from 1960s onwards. This has been a very, very liberal jurisdiction when it comes to gambling. It's just that I don't think we've regulated it adequately.
I mean, one of the things I was looking at in terms of what you were talking about with like the Betting and Gaming Council, for example, there was a wonderful. It's only like a little side note in the latest issue of Private Eye, and given today's stuff about Mr. Octopus Cohen, kind of difficult to talk about Private Eye in that context, but we have to get our news from someplace. Is like they had like a little sort of numbers thing that last year Entain, which is the owners of Ladbrokes and Coral, made a pre-tax profit of over 500 million pounds, then paid 17 million pounds in total for completely unacceptable exploitation of people who have real addictive problems with gambling, but also managed to spend £45,000 in 1 month to entertain different MPs at nice sports events to talk about the new government gambling white paper. So, it's I think, because I think if I'm right, like the Betting and Gaming Council, so like the industry lobby body, has said, oh no, this white paper is actually something, like in public they say, oh, this is right and this is what we want. I think that's the official position, right?
Yeah, it's been very interesting because I think that there's a lot of people. What they've done, the Betting and Gaming Council, is they've brought in a lot of public relations people, and public relations people who don't really understand gambling, don't really understand the industry. I mean, I think I would say I know more about gambling than all of them put together, but they're PR people. Whether they're good PR people or not is up for debate, obviously. But when you bring in a bunch of PR people and who are interested in reputation management first and foremost, then don't be surprised if the reputation they want to manage the most is their own personal one. And I think that there's been a lot of manoeuvring from their part of basically trying to convey to the public, to future and prospective employers, and to some of their members that they've scored a big victory with the white paper and welcomed it and all that sort of stuff. I mean, they're on the record as having opposed the statutory levy, for example, and now they're saying that it was their idea all along. They've actually lobbied very heavily against that because they don't want to lose control of funding, treatment, and research because it creates an implicit conflict of interest. Anyway, they've lost that battle, but they want to try to convey and project this idea that they've won this great victory. And in private, you've got the likes of Entain running astroturfing campaigns against. I
want to talk a bit about them because that's an incredible thing. I assume you talk about the players panel.
The players panel, yeah.
Yeah, which was, like you say, that's very much like an AstroTurf group who, said ostensibly that they were there to represent the interests of the ordinary gambler, which is always like, that's very danger warning stuff if you ever see any other front group that uses that kind of language. And they basically created like mailing lists and sent out like form letters on those mailing lists to have people write to their MPs and stuff and urge them to vote against these, like the upcoming reforms, while they did have like the Entain logo, I think, on their website, but not on their Facebook. But they were very like mum about where the money came from. Although, side note, in terms of like PR firms and who you're getting in bed with, this is from the Guardian. Apparently, one of the firms that was helping Entain put together the grassroots players panel turned out to be Linton Crosby's PR firm. So you get
so
a
that was
people.
Linton Crosby, so I think it's Crosby Textor, and Crosby Textor was the place that David Canzini worked, and he was the guy in number 10 who I was telling you about in the latter days of Johnson's tenure, who was crossing stuff out of the white paper. So Well, that according to Daily Mail reports anyway. So that's basically how this stuff works. This is how policy is made in this country. It's a bit shambolic, but if you can navigate a way through it and get some actual, get some good things through, then, and you manage to somehow play that messy game, then that's good, a good thing. But really, we should be living in a country which is much more sophisticated than basically doing deals and trying to, exert political pressure and ignoring all of the evidence, which is a source of intense frustration. I don't think there are other countries that are quite so. It's quite so bad as it is here. As you've got this ecosystem of public affairs companies, ex-Labour MPs, advisors, corporate invested interests, basically in this big merry-go-round, dictating and determining government policy, and ignoring not just groups and pressure groups and whatever who are trying to present another side, but just ignoring evidence and the public interest, and just doing what they want and their clients want. And it's just so corrupt. And I think if we observed that, or our great media observed that in other countries, they would call it what it is.
Well, you expecting the media to observe anything in this country and make note of something bad is a big ask, I'm afraid, Matt.
But yeah, one side note though about how picking the right people and PR firms. There was one bit in the Guardian about this before we move on, about this players panel that I just thought was incredible, and I just wanted to read a little bit from the article. While the initiative, i.e. the players panel, aims to show gambling's best side, social media posts by one of the player panel members raised questions about the diligence performed by Entain when vetting people recruited for industry lobbying. The profile of one panel member, a man from Leeds, stated, "I'd like to think I was the voice of the normal consumer," but his Facebook page revealed a list of favorite quotes containing strings of racist and homophobic slurs. So, congratulations on picking a good front man for your gambling organization. Jesus Christ.
Does sound like the voice of the working man, though.
When we said we wanted a gamer.
Yeah.
Gambling policy as dictated by the CSGO lobby.
So, but in terms of the things the real problem issues that this because of the reading that I've done, some of the things that seem to be really problematic at the moment are the fixed odds betting terminals, and a lot of the stuff that's online gambling, and specifically just gambling from your smartphones, as well as these.
Yeah. So, the fixed odds betting terminals, obviously, we campaigned to get that from £100 a spin down to £2, and that
sorry, just for people who don't gamble, can you just explain what a fixed odds betting terminal is?
Yeah, no worries. So they're machines in betting shops, and they're allowed 4 in each shop, and they used to offer roulette at one spin every 20 seconds, and you could bet up to £100 every 20 seconds on these machines. And
Jesus Christ.
They were the single biggest revenue driver by product, so they generated about $2 billion a year,
Jesus.
and about 50% of people that use them were either experiencing some form of gambling problems. So they're a very addictive product, and generating huge sums. I think each terminal on average was generating 50 grand a year profit, and that didn't require any staff, really. One staff per 4 machines in the shop, so the money was getting literally sucked out of local high streets, often very deprived areas. So a disaster on many fronts, and that got reduced to £2 in 2019 after a very long campaign. And obviously, slots online are not restricted in that way because we don't have adequate regulation of online gambling. So one of the measures that the government said they'll introduce is stake limits, and we're going to push for that to be £2 as well. So it's parity with fixed odds betting terminals. And I think you mentioned VIP schemes. There were some regulations that came in around VIP schemes. So in fact, basically, if you used to lose a lot of money online, they would assign you a VIP manager, and this person would be effectively your kind of account manager, who would contact you and offer you free tickets to concerts and football matches and nights out and all that sort of stuff, and keep you happy and keep you betting with them. If you weren't gambling for a while, you would be offered free bets and bonuses, and if you were gone for a few weeks, you'd get a phone call from your VIP manager saying, "I put £1,000 in your account. Hope to see you soon." You'd come back and gamble more, so it's pretty grim stuff, and some pretty harrowing stories. I mean, if you just Google gambling VIP scheme, Daily Mail or whatever you want to, maybe not Daily Mail, whatever you want to do, Guardian. There's some great stories in there, showing like what exactly they got up to. But there were some regulations that came in that have kind of stemmed that a little bit. They've got to do proper rigorous affordability checks now before they add anyone to a VIP scheme. I mean, there was one case I think it was on Panorama a few years ago where one of the ladies on the who was made a VIP, her mum had just died, and they'd managed to get hold of the call recording through a subject access request, and it was the VIP manager was saying something like, "Oh, I haven't seen you in ages," and she said, "Yeah, my mum's just died," or something like that, and she said, "Oh, well, here's £500 in your account. Hope to see you soon." I mean, it was just really grim. Clearly, this person was addicted.
What if your crack dealer had an account manager for you?
That's basically what it is, and it just goes to the heart of the whole business model of the industry, which is that they rely on people losing more than they can afford and getting addicted. So all of these practices just run completely counter to their narrative, their own narrative and rhetoric, which is we care, we are in favour of responsible gambling, stay in control, take time to think, all this stuff. That's not what they're doing in practice. What they're doing in practice is the opposite of that, and that's why it's so, I think, sinister. It's a horrendous, and anyone who advocates on behalf of it, in my view, they're actually, the lobbyists for me are worse than the industry, because the industry is doing what any industry under capitalism would do, and I'm not making excuses for it, but it is basically making as much profit as possible within the confines of regulation. And if that is harming people, then regulation is not fit for purpose and you have to change it. But the lobbyists for the industry they're excusing the inexcusable, they're defending the indefensible. And I think that they are infinitely more disgusting, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well, they would just want it to be so you can have the, when the fun stops, stop signs in the local, betting shop. But going beyond putting up a couple of posters, that's just beyond the pale.
No, I remember it was, I think, about 2 years ago, and I went with my mother-in-law, who's since passed, but we went to, she used to, she always liked going to the bingo, because that was usually, in the old days, that was part of the working men's clubs, and that was just something she just liked doing. So she still went, even though now it obviously had become this huge, more commercial hall with a lot of slot machines and all that stuff as well. But she just came in to just play the bingo and do the one card and just play it very simply for a couple quid. And, that's fine by me. I have no issue with that. But I remember, I think it was the second time I went to the bathroom. It was only as I came out in the deepest, darkest corner where you would just literally pass it without a glance because it would be in your line of sight. That right there in that little corner was a little box with the flyer saying "responsible gambling, please," and everything else was one giant inducement to just keep going. And it you saw so many people not with one sheet but with 20 and everything automated on iPads and stuff. It was just really, really grim.
I think the whole responsible gambling thing is quite an interesting notion or paradigm to unpick, because effectively what you're saying when you advocate for responsible gambling is you're saying that if the individual is getting addicted to your products, that they are not responsible. And all the while you're designing your products to be addictive and for them to be losing more than they can afford, because that's your business model. And you're basically saying that it's a lie, really. It's premised on a lie, and it's actually a stigmatizing lie, which actually I think increases the likelihood that people take their own lives, which is what's happening at the moment.
It's that same mindset that runs through anything else where the government's supposed to intervene to help. Like fucking, like, I mean, just the first one I can think of just now, COVID policy. Like, that was so heavily hammered in it's personal responsibility, and that is how we will resolve this. Or climate change, that's personal responsibility. Have you considered recycling? It's, motherfucker, what am I supposed to do about the systems in place with a fucking blue bin? What are you talking about?
Sign a change.org petition.
Yeah, it's not a surprise that they can't see past that way of thinking and just apply it as the very first thing. It's, have you tried gambling responsibly? It's just fucking useless. But that's with these kind of people in charge of the systems, though. Like, this is always what it's going to be like. You're always going to be fighting an uphill battle to get anything more than that in place. Otherwise, you'll have some dickhead who used to have a high position in the Labour Party screaming like fuck on Twitter about you.
I think the thing that we've been able to leverage, or maybe we've benefited from with gambling, is gambling reform, and how that may differ from other sectors. Is gambling is an inherently adversarial relationship between the consumer and the provider, and it's not the logic. If there is a logic to the market, a free market, then that just doesn't apply to gambling. It does require regulation. Otherwise, you end up with very, very powerful gambling operators exploiting their own consumers. They're not trying to look after their customers. It's not like another sector.
How can you say it's adversarial and they'll assign you a bestest friend to ring you and gamble for a couple of weeks?
Do you know? I actually know someone personally who was in a VIP in one of these schemes very many years ago, and obviously he's in recovery. He's been in recovery for a long time, and I'm sure he won't mind me saying, but this person used to become. I think it was a form of like grooming almost. He saw him as a very, very good friend. He was house sitting for him. I mean, it was like they used to go away together, and he was getting a cut of his losses. He was getting 20% of everything that he lost. So it was, and he didn't know about it. So I mean, just horrendous, but proper Wild West stuff.
That is fucking insane. The crack dealer is now living in your house.
Yeah.
It's interesting because like it's a straight sort of copy, and I think sort of emotionally as well in terms of like how you present it is like that's a model that comes from like I know it still exists now, but it's from like sort of the old school like Las Vegas casinos where people who would literally have like millions or billions and they would come in and like bet big on hands because they like maybe whether they should or shouldn't is sort of beside the point at the moment, like. But they could more afford it, and they would be like they would get like free rooms and free stuff, and nice dinners paid for. And it's like we've just taken that same model, but like made it into more like sort of quasi-personal, quasi-telemarketing. And then instead of saying, "Oh well, you can have like $1,000 to have a Michelin star dinner," you get 500 quid in your account, or you get I don't know, tickets to a football. I assume there were tickets to like football matches and stuff in there as well, like proper entertainment stuff.
Exactly. No, it's that model, isn't it? Of we'll get the whales, they used to call them, the big spenders, and we'll look after them, and they'll come and. But obviously the difference being, Vegas is a destination venue. People flying in for a few days, they might lose more than they can afford. But if they're a whale and they're a VIP, a genuine VIP, they'll be hopefully it's not going to impact them too much financially. But then they're applying that exactly to online gambling, which is ubiquitous. Everyone can gamble online. It's not like you have to be a high roller in Vegas. You have to be gambling hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands a spin. To gamble online, you have to. The minimum stake is like a pound or something. So it's not. It's so accessible to those on the lowest incomes, and you're basically applying that same model to people who clearly, disproportionately, it's coming from people who can't afford to lose that money, and it's pretty grim. I think as well as that, like there's other elements that our own research or the research that we've commissioned has highlighted, which is the data abuse that takes place. So the profiling of customers. So our gambling operators will know a huge amount about you. Even if you don't sign up, if you just go onto the website with cookie drops and everything like that, they'll be able to immediately start profiling you. And the things they know about their customers, such as how much they earn, where they live, how much their house is worth, how much they would be worth how much it'd be worth bonusing that customer in order to win them back and to still make a profit from them. So if someone hasn't gambled for a long time, they come up with, using their algorithms and their profiling, they'll come up with a figure, let's just say £800. And that figure is how much that player would lose within a certain amount of time. So therefore, if we bonus that person £600, we'll make a profit out of them. So we'll entice them back with that. And there's all these techniques that they use to try to optimize engagement. So, I mean, it's like other sectors really, but I think it's more pernicious because gambling is addictive and there's an adversarial relationship. So things like push notifications at particular times, when to send a bonus offer, when to send an offer. Like, is this guy an Arsenal fan? Well, should we give him an offer just before the game kicks off? And, you know, we know when he's in the stadium, so we'll send him a push notification then. Like, all of these things it's basically a big tech company that's designed, it's like an extractive vehicle designed to extract as much as it can out of individuals and just spit them out, and then obviously invest in marketing again. So 1.5 billion out of 6 billion profits goes back into marketing, which then tries to, you know, replace the people that have gone broke. So it just leaves, it's this constant trail of destruction. So, you know, again, to use a supermarket analogy, that 1.5 billion profit that Tesco's is making, or 3 billion that those three supermarkets are making, and that's not destroying the customers those customers will be coming back. Whereas gambling is very, very different. That customer base that's driving the revenue is constantly changing. It's getting younger. Sorry, I'm going on a bit of a rant there, but that's
no, go for it. Like
that's why we record this shit.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's what you're here for, Matt.
So much of this, certainly in the gambling industry, also seems to very highly rely, as you say, you know, with these VIP schemes and stuff. They rely, as far as I understand it, very much not on, you know, the image that they like to present with, you know, oh, it's just somebody occasionally, you know, throwing in a fiver to have some fun. The real profit margins are in that much smaller but much more critical community of people who get addicted or who have real problems with gambling or who really gamble far, far beyond their means. Like, that does seem to be
exactly. And this is the thing. This is the mythology around gambling and betting, particularly sports betting, is that the revenue's been driven by the occasional sports bettor who might put an accumulator on every now and again, or might bet on their team, or might take advantage of a bonus every now and again, you know, through the apps.
Sorry, just for me, what the hell's an accumulator?
Sorry, an accumulator would be so betting on multiple matches. So say if you bet on the result of 5 matches and getting accumulated odds from those, like
okay,
yeah. So you'd have to get all 5 right or whatever. But it's a bit of fun that some people, you know, I can see why that might be considered a bit of fun if it's low stakes and it's every so often. But that's the problem is, once you're on the platform, they're not going to want to. Ideally, they're going to want to get you onto the slots or get you onto the casino product or get you to gamble on more matches or more frequently. So they're constantly trying to get people to gamble more, and those that end up doing so, and that might happen over a period of time or it might happen quickly, are the ones that are driving the revenue. So as I say, 86% coming from the 5% who've got experience in gambling harm. So yeah, so it's 95% providing 14% of the revenue, which is they're the occasional, very infrequent gamblers who might bet once a year on the Grand National or whatever. You know, that would still be considered a customer. But yeah, it's an industry that's based on harm. So when you start to campaign like I have for policies or measures that would reduce harm, it's going to reduce their profits in the short term quite significantly. And the government's estimated that about 14% of their gross revenues will lead to a reduction in that potentially in the next year or so, which would be a start, but still, I think there's still more work to do.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things I wanted to certainly touch on as well is the relationship between gambling firms and specifically football. It was one of the things, again, that I really noticed personally last time I was in the UK as well, is that we were just having a drink in Sunday in the pub, and like the moment the matches came on, like you saw so many people on their phones like placing bets, and much more than just like, oh, it's the outcome, but as I understand it, like you can also bet on who gets the first free kick, what is the coin toss going to be, like all these sort of very quick bets that, like quick time bets that can just keep you sort of hooked during the match as well. And sort of the relationship between the Premier League and I know that I think it's like 6 Premier League teams that have like front of shirt advertising from gambling firms as just in general, basically.
It's about 10 actually now. So it's about
Jesus
half. Yeah.
Christ.
So,
Don't worry, Rob. It's actually much worse.
Oh, good. The slogan of this podcast, yes.
the really interesting thing about the Ivan Toney case, if anyone's followed that, where he was gambling. Well, he was gambling on his own. He was gambling on football, which as a footballer is a big no in the rules. And he was gambling on his own team, but he was out on loan at the time. So, but he was also gambling on himself to score, which I don't think you can really fix. I mean, he was gambling on himself. Clearly, he had a gambling addiction, and that was part of the mitigating circumstances around why he only got an 8-month ban, which I still felt was very hypocritical, because you've got a sector here in football which is quite happy to take gambling money, quite happy to allow gambling and betting companies to offer markets on things that are quite obviously very fixable. So things like number of throw-ins or time of first throw or number of corners. I mean, if you could, in theory, fix that, if you bet on a ridiculous amount of throw-ins in the game and you just kept kicking the ball out, like there's ways of actually influencing.
Yeah. You open the door to quite literal match fixing, basically.
Exactly, and they've been quite prepared to do that. Now, in France, there are very strict rules about what you can offer bets on, and there's a proper agreement between betting companies and the sports governing body about they pay a license fee in order to offer bets on the sport, and we've just not done that. We've just said, well, we'll take the gambling money, but in exchange, we'll just promote gambling to children, and that is basically what's happened with it. So I feel like Ivan Toney was running around the pitch with Hollywood bets on his shirt, and lots of these companies, the first time you hear about them is when they start sponsoring Premier League football teams. So I think that football needs to look at itself. I think that it's tried to traduce this to just one bad apple, one individual, but actually I think it's a structural problem, and I think that there's lots of footballers that are addicted to gambling, and if you've created that environment where gambling is very normalised and you've offered the opportunity to bet on things that are easily fixable, you're asking for trouble. It's basically inevitable that's going to happen.
Oh, we've spent all this money on advertising gambling to everyone and anyone, and we're just completely surprised when everyone and anyone has started gambling. Outrageous! Why have they done this? They should be betting responsibly and not on the football matches that they are literally playing in.
I mean, so as I understand it, like part of this, the deal in the white paper is that this would like remove like these ads that you were just talking about, at least from like is it only the front of shirt of players, or like everywhere on shirt? But like you would still be able to like put gambling banners on the sides of the stadium, on the sides of the pitch, etc., or is it like a broader ban on this type of gambling?
Yeah, they bottled it really with the marketing. So I think on the other things, I was quite pleased with where we got to, but I think there's so many vested interests around marketing, not least football, but also the broadcasters and the media, and obviously it's the Department of Culture, Media and Sport that oversees gambling, and I feel like they've shied away from doing anything that's going to impact broadcaster revenues. For example, ITV, I think they generated about 100 million last year from gambling ads. So it's a big money
Jesus,
spinner for the
100 fuck
broadcasters. Yeah, obviously it was World Cup. So I think that's where this kind of voluntary agreement came from. But that's not going to kick in for another 2 years, where, as you say, it'll only apply to the front of the shirts. But I think we've established the principle now that this is clearly harmful, and that's why they're doing this voluntary ban. So I'm hoping it's the first domino. If it's not, then as I said before, like, I think there's more pressure on the government to make sure the industry is safe, and, or at least safer, and not like exploiting people to the extent that it is, if you're going to like promote it as much as you're allowing.
So I want to move to wrapping this up because also we've been going for a while. But before I do, maybe this is just a perception thing, or maybe it's just sort of the mood that I get in, or this podcast tends to get into. But there seems to be like a weird thing where the Labour Party seems more connected with like the gambling lobby than the Tories, and I always kind of assumed that like the natural home for this stuff would be the Tories. What we talked about, the own responsibility narrative. It's just free market, etc., baby. But there does seem to be this like very disturbing internecine relationship between the Labour Party and the gambling lobby. I mean, we already talked about Michael Dugar, but there's a lot of like, it's even now like money flowing from donations to like people like Rachel Reeves and Wes Streeting, who are all getting money from like either directly from the firms or people very closely associated too.
Yeah, I've written a bit about this, and I think I did one for Navarra actually. And look, I think it's prepare to have your perceptions challenged here, because Margaret Thatcher was very against gambling, and she saw that as, again, like against the logic of the market. And it wasn't until that she resigned that the National Lottery came in. She was really against the National Lottery. She thought that would be very bad, have very bad consequences. So there is a strain of.
Was she against it for good reasons, or should you just not like the idea of poors getting above their state?
I think
even
it was
1 in every 15 million is too many.
I think it was her belief that I'm not an expert on Thatcherism, but I think it was a belief that markets aren't in and of themselves moral, and people need to make good decisions within that framework, within that free market framework, and gambling is not a good decision. Government shouldn't encourage it. I broadly think that's what it was.
Wealth should be earned, etc.
It's that kind of Protestantism, exactly. And I think and I think the Labour Party, by contrast, I think that the issue with Labour is it's full of middle management, kind of ex-professional class MPs who aren't really working class at all, but are kind of, I think through their own class prejudice, are almost ventriloquizing the working class, but in a really bad way. And I think that there's just sort of, I think the gambling lobby, that's really fertile ground for them, because they're basically saying, hey, your constituents do all this stuff. Why would you want to do anything to clamp down on it? And they're just falling for it because they are not from that culture. They're not from that background. So that's basically what happens. They fall into this space and then become their biggest offenders.
Part of me thinks that the only reason that you don't get the here's some football tickets because you're a VIP type thing is because the ex-Labour MPs that went to work in the industry thought it was really, really bad that these people hadn't had to suffer through being a Labour MP to get these kind of treats.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, it's pretty amazing the extent of the revolving door, and obviously it was a new Labour government that introduced the 2005 Gambling Act. And I mean, what the until recently the MP for Sedgefield, who took Tony Blair's place when he resigned, was formerly a coral lobbyist. So it's always been a revolving door. It's always been that way. There are a number of ex-MPs who are working at the Betting and Gaming Council now. So yeah, super interesting in that regard. But the Labour left has obviously been great on this stuff, and has always been allies. And obviously, when Jeremy was leader, we were able to get Labour policy in a good place, and lots of the policies that were advocated for during Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, gambling reform policies, ended up making it into the terms of reference of the call for evidence for the Gambling Act review. So that's something, I guess.
Yeah, so at least some work went to a good point, yeah.
There's a very simple logic to it, though, because those betting shops with all the fixed odd betting terminals, you know where those have to be, right? Towns. That's where they go.
Yeah, that's the sweet siren song of Lisa Nandy. I hear that. I think we'll start wrapping up here. So, of course, before we do plugs and things, Matt, is there any sort of final thoughts, or specifically like this white paper's out now and it's going to be making its way through like the whole parliamentary process, of course, if it gets done before there's a general election, etc., etc. But is there anything like people who've listened to this, or people who maybe have like who listen to this have personal experiences with all this? What is there anything that like they could do to sort of get this thing across the line, or even improve it more, maybe?
Yeah, if you head to cleanupgambling.com and you put your email address in there, I will send the consultations and how to respond, and do that in a very easy, accessible format when they are released. There's going to be quite a number of consultations to implement the recommendations in the white paper. And if you are experiencing gambling problems and you want to do something about it, then head to talkbanstop.com and you can get Gamban, my blocking software, for free through talkbanstop.com, and also sign up to GamStop, which is a self-exclusion register, and there's free help and support available either through GamCare or through the National Health Service, which have got dedicated gambling addiction clinics now, which is great. So yeah, and also you can speak to me or direct message me on Twitter if you like.
All right. Well, with all that said and done, shall we? I don't know, David. Do we want to do our plugs after all that, or shall we?
Just very quickly, yeah. Patreon.com/PraxisCast for bonus episodes. Twitch.tv/PraxisCast for the streams, Wednesdays and Thursdays, and any other time that James might have something on. Obviously, that might be a little bit delayed at the moment with the motherboard exploding, so wait out on that. And yeah, you can get merch as well at praxiscast.tmail.com. And yeah, thanks very much, Matt, for coming on. Always a pleasure to have you, and we'll hopefully see you again soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much. That went really quick, so I must have enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Cheers.
What I will say is, like, before we leave, is like, I know this has been more of a sort of substantive, more heavy going episode. If you need any more inducement to like join our Patreon, the latest Patreon bonus is about turning whales into cold hard cash, and that's just us laughing our heads off for like an hour and a half.
Whales with an H.
Yes.
It's even dumber than it sounds.
Yes, it's way more dumb.
Fucking hell. Yeah, so yeah, enjoy that. That's up on the feed. So yeah, join us and join that. Join us and enjoy that even. And yeah, we'll catch you all next week for a cultural committee episode, possibly the last one ever. We'll see. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
Interesting.